two, one, two, three.
Hello and welcome to Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. I'm here today with Katie Sims. Katie Sims is the chair of Ithaca DSA's electoral committee. But Katie, back in April, you attended National DSA's Socialism is the Future conference. What was it about?
So the DSA's Socialism is the Future conference was a very cool and very big conference that was actually largely a YDSA conference for the college participants in YDSA, which is the Young Democratic Socialists of America. And in addition to that, they brought together two cohorts of DSA members who are working on labor work and electoral work across the country. And these were intended to be small groups and to bring them all together alongside this much larger YDSA conference to talk about some of the key issues that DSA chapters are navigating, some of the big campaigns, and how we can really build up the dispersed chapter work on these priorities in coordination with the national bodies that are working on them. So DSA is a democratic member-led organization where members across the country work in small groups in their areas and kind of follow the political platform of DSA, but also those chapters all come together, and that is how the political platform and the leadership and the national bodies are decided. So it's kind of a lot of work to manage this reciprocal process. But anyway, this conference was an opportunity to talk about how we move towards socialism, what the big areas of our socialist fight are, and how we can do the best job to make gains toward the socialism of the future.
And I take it that two of the big areas that lots and lots of locals are working on, because DSA does not have a top-down rule that a local organization has to be pursuing something that the national told them to do. Yeah. They come up with their own projects depending largely on local conditions. In fact, I can say that one reason why our chapter got into video and now radio is that back in the 1990s, we had a discussion and decided that the lack of alternative media in the community was the biggest problem, whereupon several of us jumped into action in various ways. And you might say we're still around.
Yeah, and it's very cool that the organization is so directed on the local level, and that a lot of people want to throw around that people, especially in elections, they're the DSA candidates are all just doing the bidding of the National Democratic Socialists of America, but that's really not true. Every local is really has its own analysis and also sees how we're part of a bigger movement, because we know that we can't just win socialism in Ithaca. So I think that having that kind of both ways share, the ebb and flow of information both ways is really important to building good work, local progressive socialist work on the ground, and having it connect to something bigger than just what we can do in our little city.
I was also going to say that while a chapter decides what it will do, what it will prioritize, two of the very common areas are electoral work and labor support work.
Yeah, and that's why they brought together these two cohorts at the Socialism of the Future conference. And I was part of the electoral cohort kind of, know clearly by your introduction, that's my major work in the Ithaca local. And it was the electoral cohort was kind of our opportunity to compare notes for socialist electoral programs across the country with people from like Chicago and San Francisco and LA and New York City, and a bunch of other chapters too. But it was very much like what's working, what's not working, how does your city do it, what could we do instead? Good exchange of information.
Well, what distinguishes DSA's electoral work?
Yeah, I think both in Ithaca and around the country, the fact that like real excited local people, largely volunteers, are the ones that are like driving these campaigns, and they're doing it from a sense of like movement politics. They're doing it from a sense of collectivity, and that there's no like volunteer role that's too small or too big to be a part of the collective that's pushing forward our vision of democratic socialism. So like, and in DSA, everyone is an organizer. Our role as organizers is to talk to other people about socialism and bring them into our fight together and ask them if they want to be part of it, because it's not about like you helping someone else get into office. What it's about is helping, like, creating a big enough network of people to elect someone who will fight for us, and fight for our vision of what justice and fairness is. And so I think that collective vision isn't the same anywhere else. It's not something that like the Democratic or Republican parties are pushing. They're very much about, this is like a good person. Maybe, they're trying to convince you that this is like a good person, or that this is like a person who like has the right ideas or something. But what we're saying instead is like, we all deserve to have a say, and like we are working together to change things. And so whether you're just you're going to one canvassing session and knocking 5 doors, that's part of organizing for the world that we want to win. And it goes all the way up to people who are like volunteering huge amounts of time, and who really see it as like, one of the main things that they do, and are really driven by that sense of collective purpose and meaning from it. So I think that at all kind of levels of participation, that's what really sets DSA campaigns apart from, volunteering for like a standard Democrats campaign.
Well, in fact, something I've seen right here is people who start out as volunteers in campaigns and eventually run for office themselves.
Yeah, and one thing that we really are, is I think in Ithaca changing, is like the sense of who can be in office, because historically it's been that like if you can like self-fund your campaign, or if you like have some friends who can like pay for your yard signs and mailers, like you can win an office in Ithaca. And you have to knock like a couple hundred doors or make a couple hundred phone calls, but they haven't been super competitive, and they've just been like hugely skewed toward people with money, and older people and homeowners, and typically white people. And what we're saying instead is that someone who like is not wealthy, who might be younger, who might be a person of color, who might be who's often a tenant, can, and like, especially with tenancy, like it's really hard to run for office if you don't have housing stability, because it's like tied to your address. And so what we're saying instead is like, if you feel up for the task of like being a representative of the working class, of Ithacans who have been pushed out and marginalized, of people who like the government doesn't, whose needs the government doesn't take seriously, then we'll come together around you, and we will help fundraise, and we will knock the doors, and we'll do it as a shared effort, instead of just saying like, you don't have the right stuff to run for office because you're not like a super well-connected person who's retired and has a house and $2,000 to buy a bunch of home cards.
Getting back to this conference that you were at, who did you hear from there?
Yeah, I think to me, the like really stood out were we heard a lot from people in New York City DSA, and the group of organizers, and there's a lot of them because there's a lot of campaigns in New York City, are, have been running numerous state level campaigns for the state assembly and state senate. And those state level campaigns have like an outsized amount of influence because there are a number of people that you can like feasibly reach and win an office for as, a medium-sized political organization. And they're like state houses are the least kind of restricted in what kinds of laws they can pass, although they don't, have the access to money in the same way that the federal government does. But they have a ton of power to legislate. And those races are also, really big operations because you have to be efficient at canvassing people. So that was really exciting. And I think the things that I took away from that are working long-term with people to build strong networks of leadership. And, I think just like I said before, thinking about every volunteer as an organizer, because we are all like people who have agency and value and like leadership in the fight that we're taking on together. And like every single person who wants to contribute should be welcomed into having that agency and that influence also, because that's what that's the world that we're trying to build, is one where everyone has a say. That's what like democracy is really about. And so that was a big part of it. And then I think another thing that was really exciting is there were a lot of people from across the state of California who were working on local races, but are exploring like statewide races more now. And talking to people in that setting, it's great to hear about how, we can strategically use our effort to, to find kind of the fights that we're more likely to win, that are more like strategic to take on, because, as people who want to build power for the working class instead of the like people who already own the power and the wealth in our society, we're up against really strong enemies and we lose a lot. And that's that kind of comes with the territory. And I don't think you just can't really kind of afford to be a socialist and not expect to lose somewhat often. But when we pick our fight strategically, we can like gain real wins. And so it was great to hear from people across the country about how to, get into the data, how to think about how many people you can mobilize, where you can mobilize them, and how to be strategic about winning bigger gains.
And I know there has been a lot of discussion around the country involving what some see as problems with the chapter's relationship to an elected official that they send to office, who then meets all sorts of new influences and challenges. Yeah, can you comment on what chapters elsewhere have experienced in their relationships with endorsed electeds?
Yeah, I'll try to, I don't want to get too much into like the DSA internal politics. So I'll try to like take the lens of like, if you're a community member who wants to like participate in electing elected officials who are like accountable to you, here's like how to think about like DSA and what role that plays. Is like the more work that DSA puts into, and like DSA members, volunteers put into electing someone, the more that the like elected is accountable to them, because they couldn't do it without them. And I think when we talk about DSA like expanding the possibilities of who can run for office in Ithaca, and I just want to say, like, I don't think that DSA is like doing that alone. I also think that like there's lots of factors that like change that. But when we like build strong relationships with people running for office, and we contribute to their campaigns, and we like, kind of as an organization build a vision together with the candidate, we have the opportunity to like have our platform followed through on in office. And it's true that like we, organizations can endorse lots of people and then like leave it up to chance what happens in office. But I think that what's different about DSA is our commitment to like actually being really deeply involved in the race, in the campaign, and not just like saying we agree with this person or like we think their ideas are good, but like if DSA is endorsing in a race, that means that DSA is going to be working hard on the campaign, at least for Ithaca DSA. And I think that indicates to people that, and should like, and I hope like to invite kind of, people listening to this who might be interested in like being represented authentically by someone who cares about them to like come into DSA and work on campaigns, because by doing that and like by building a group of people who can like shift the possibility of who's elected, we can also shift the possibility of what happens in office.
So would you say that Ithaca DSA locally has experienced good things in their
Yeah, I think I'll say like the Solidarity Slate electeds, the current electeds meet frequently with members of DSA, and I think anyone really just like a normal elected, their email inboxes are open and anyone can email them, but they have standing meetings with the Solidarity Slate and like as a result of that members of DSA, and the continuation also of the campaign work is that in office, our local electeds they have the city staff, but they don't have office staff who are like, responsible to them as elected officials. And so DSA also like can offer the kind of legislative support of doing research on policies, helping write up the language, and creating like strategic plans to get them passed. And I think, DSA has been able to like forge those relationships, and specifically at the local level, like I want to be clear that I'm not talking about like national DSA is like doing kind of is doing this. Like it is people in our community, like myself and others who are like who care very deeply about Ithaca, who understand what's going on in Ithaca and what the political needs are, and who work alongside the DSA electeds to help come up with solutions and make plans.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the slate, and perhaps you could say a little bit more about what the slate has been.
Yeah. So right, that's a kind of so the Solidarity Slate is the candidates who DSA and the Working Families Party and the Ithaca Tenants Union have collectively endorsed, or they've individually endorsed, but then like we come together in this shared project to elect them. And the slate is the slate of the candidates, but it's also the kind of organization and support structure for them. And so that includes like the campaign volunteers throughout the campaign season. It includes people who do policy research throughout the, all the time. And it's members of the DSA and the Tenants Union and the Working Families Party.
Though I understand that the Working Families Party has quite a few endorsements that are not slate endorsements.
Yeah, and all of the organizations like in the slate collaboration are free to endorse whoever they want outside of the slate collaboration. But what the slate collaboration allows us to do is understand all three of the groups have their own political alignment and analysis and strategy. And so it doesn't always make sense for them to work together because there are places where they diverge. But like, we know that we're stronger when we're together because like all of it comes down to people power. And so whenever we do agree, it makes sense for us to work together. And so that's kind of where this like slate comes in. It's like, you know, when we're going to be working in the same area, we're all working together. And then the other things that we don't necessarily all want to prioritize or all agree on or whatnot, we can like do outside of that coalition space.
Do you foresee changes in the slate, in the way the slate works in coming years?
I think it's all, I mean, it's only a couple years old, and I think that like all political projects grow and change, and that's one of the best, you know, that we have to like remember to do that, because otherwise things kind of go bad. But one of the things that I am really excited about is that the slate is planning right now some like town hall meetings to, I'm not sure if they'll actually be called town hall meetings, but to do like participatory policy work where we come together and talk about what people want in the budget, what laws people want passed, what like priorities people have, like what's really important and what could we actually like wait a year or two to do, to continue refining the Solidarity Slate platform and like work on plans for upcoming like legislation. And so I think that's like something that's always kind of been a goal of the slate, is to have these types of collaborative and participatory like visioning workshops, opportunities, and to like really come up with collaborative plans. And I think that is gonna like more, we're gonna be able to make it more of a reality soon.
Oh, interesting. Yes, I think actually before there even was a slate, so several years ago, the tenants union, which is one of the slate members, was doing some of these meetings, but definitely around tenants issues.
Yeah. So the tenants union did some for the right to renew leases or good cause eviction. And that was kind of, you know, it's one of the like weird things that it's like, and I understand when people don't necessarily understand what's going, like what's what, who are all these organizations, but it was to refine the good cause policy that was really pushed by the slate, like when, even though it was kind of before Jorge and Phoebe took office, but it was, we hoped that we were going to be able to like get it passed once Jorge and Phoebe took office, but legal challenges changed things and all this stuff. But
be a bit more specific about what you mean about good cause or just cause, and what the legislative issues were.
Yeah, so good cause eviction would guarantee the right of people to renew their leases, like as long as they paid their rent on time and didn't break their lease in any other way. And so, but there's like a lot of specifics and nuances, and sometimes there's carve outs. And so the tenants union did these assemblies where people kind of talk in circles, like they go around in a circle and talk. They don't talk in circles like in the derogatory way or the negative way. But they to talk about what kinds of carve-outs would be reasonable and what kinds of carve-outs would not. So like, for example, there's always this cry around this law of like owner-occupied property should be excluded. And we like what, you know, discussions of like whether that is like fair to tenants who happen to live in an owner-occupied building, you know, whether they deserve that protection also, or whether it makes sense because the owner lives there and they, you know. So I think when we can have really clear like broad principles about what we believe as democratic socialists, but we do need to get together locally and talk about what the specifics are. And so things like people's assemblies or town halls allow us, or like participatory policy workshops allow us to really clarify those things in our own community with the people who are affected by the policy.
So I think you also sort of alluded to a local attempt to get eviction only for good cause passed here was upset by, not directly, but indirectly by a court ruling elsewhere in the state, where some judge ruled that no, only Albany can pass a law like that.
Mm-hmm.
You said that in California, they were looking at statewide offices. Is that what would be necessary here? You also mentioned that from New York City, people get elected who serve in Albany.
Yeah, so the New York City state representatives who were backed by DSA, we call them the socialists in office in New York State, and they have really been champions for passing good cause eviction at the state level. And our state representative, Anna Kellis, also was an advocate for it this year. And so there definitely was movement at the state level for it, but the deal fell apart last minute in this like back room, late night kind of situation. And yeah, it just fell apart. And so we didn't get it passed this year, even though it had been optimistic for a while that it might pass at the state this year. So we'll see next year's legislative session. And there's multiple ways to approach state level policy. Some of it is getting people elected who will fight for those policies, and part of it is also running really strong pressure campaigns and advocating for the policy that we want passed, to the people who are already in office. And next year is an election year. Next year is an election year for state assembly. So what that offers the opportunity for is for the increased pressure of a challenge, and also it tends to make people more conservative with their with what they want to pass, which is the real downside of it. So yeah.
Well, we'll see what happens next year. We'll also see what happens next year as a result of some local elections this year. Thank you, Katie Sims. A lot to say about DSA and electoral politics. This has been Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. Thanks for watching.